and welcome to this edition of Big Deal. I am Nisha Poddar. Let's take it straight to the action on the deal street. And remember, lots of deals got announced, lots of big events, which also will propel probably the future deals. Let's take a look at the top headlines this week on the deal street. Reliance Jio is here in a bid to shake up India's telecom landscape at $20 billion. This is the company's biggest investment till date. And will it trigger telecom consolidation is the big question. It was first reported by CNBC TV 18 and it's official now. Zee Entertainment sells its sports business to Sony for 2,600 crore rupees. The sale will be completed within 4 to 5 months. Former GE veteran Pramod Bhasin, along with Anil Chawla in Aeon Capital, acquires the commercial lending and leasing business of GE, the company in India, and says that it's the right time to invest in the country. All right, so those were the top headlines. Let's take it straight to the big event this week, which has the potential, remember, to shake up the entire telecom sector. Reliance Industries has announced the launch of Reliance Jio, which will be its biggest investment till date by the company. And chairman of the company, Mukesh Ambani, made the announcement at the company's 42nd annual general meeting. Now, Jio's launch will intensify the bruising tariff war, which is already underway in the sector. And the big announcement from Reliance Jio is this: voice calls will be free of cost and data cost will be 50 rupees for 1 gigabyte. Dedicating the launch to Prime Minister's Digital India vision, Mukesh Ambani said that the company is embarking on a new era. He also had a message for the incumbent telecom companies: play fair and do not misuse the market power to really create the unfair hurdles in the sector. Here are the top headlines of that speech.
Data packs available in the market have an effective rate today of 250 rupees a GB. With Jio, you pay 5 to 10 times. So we are bringing this 250 per GB, and you can optimize to 50 rupees a GB, and if you use more data, then you can go all the way down to 25 rupees a GB. Incumbent operators have significant advantages over new entrants, since incumbents have well-established networks and existing customers. New entrants require fair access to both. Therefore, the onus is rightly on the incumbent operators not to misuse their market power by creating unfair hurdles when it comes to providing point of interconnect between their network and Jio's network.
So that's the big announcement. But remember, we at CNBC TV 18 have been trying to really analyze the impact of Rel Jio's launch on the entire landscape of the telecom sector. 5 things that can really happen: aggressive bids in the spectrum auctions, upcoming spectrum auctions to hold 4G airwaves can be something that the incumbent players may want to do to fight the competition. Also remember that a big bank IPO of Vodafone is on the anvil. So will Vodafone chart that territory right now, or will have to re-strategize, and at what valuation is also a big question to watch out for. Also, the trigger of a wave of consolidation. Is this going to really lead to that? How many can survive in a competitive environment like this is also another big question, because there is clearly very little room for players below the top 3 ones. And remember, this particular sector requires deep pockets, so huge capex requirement to upgrade infrastructure as well as networks. So that's also going to be one of the important factors playing out in the sector. All right, to throw more light and to understand whether or not there will be enough and more deals in the telecom sector, let's get on board Topsy Matthew of Stancy, who's joining us on the show. Topsy, good to have you on the show. Of course, this particular launch has been a big one by Rel Jio. It's a big player which has entered the market. Tariff war is what everybody is expecting. But how do you see the landscape changing, and do you also see this as a trigger of many deals in the sector?
Thanks, Nisha. Clearly, the events of yesterday have taken fairly center stage in terms of the telecom industry and the landscape. The tariff war, as you sort of alluded to, effectively has been on for a few days prior as well. Most of the lead players have already adjusted down some of their tariffs. We are seeing the large announcement yesterday around Jio. Going forward, we do expect a fair number of further well-defined price plans being announced by most of the incumbents and even the tier 2 players to compete against this fairly formidable launch. In terms of consolidation, is this going to lead to immediate consolidation? My view would be a relatively lower possibility, largely on account of the fact that there is fair degree of opportunity for the players to focus on the competitive aspect of the market as opposed to slight distractions of consolidation or M&A, particularly given that some of the players have already undertaken strategic moves of buying spectrum from some of the competition already.
All right. So are there many such opportunities? Because some of them are just fighting for survival at this point when it comes to the tier 2 players. So are there big ones who could also play the role of consolidator? And is there any value in some of these assets which may be available?
Clearly, from what we've seen in the last 12 months, there's been a reasonable amount of activity by way of spectrum acquisitions, which players like Bharti have undertaken to buy, let's say, Videocon's spectrum, or be it the case of acquiring Aircell's BWA spectrum. Such moves have happened. There are a few others also who've looked at considering such moves but did not consummate anything. We expect this trend to continue. We do not see big bang transactions other than for the likes of Aircell and Arcom, which is already in the works and is expected to be consummated in a fairly short time period. I don't see incremental number of transactions happening in the near term, but definitely this is going to be a trend which will play itself out in the medium to longer term.
What about the larger players also, Topsy? Some of them will be feeling the heat at this point. The tariff war is also going to have a huge role to play when taking certain decisions on the deal street. Do you think that consolidation amongst the top players could also be an eventuality going forward if the competition is really going to be stiff?
Nisha, as I sort of mentioned, I think immediate focus is going to be, on the street, fighting for the customer, retaining customers, and also trying to manage the overall, the customer base that exists. The larger players are in a reasonably comfortable position of having, over the top 3 players account for close to 70+% of the revenue base in the market. And for them, defending that position is going to be first priority. I do see them looking at consolidation opportunities as a secondary step, as they wouldn't want to get distracted from the primary business of operating their activities in the market.
And so nothing immediate is what you're saying. But also, Topsy, you've been an iBanker and you have focused on telecom for so long. And there are mergers and acquisitions guidelines also, which could be restrictive, like in terms of market share, not more than 50% in a particular circle, or in terms of spectrum, not more than 25% in a circle, or 50% of band of spectrum in that circle. So there are many restrictions. Do you see that these are restrictive in nature when it comes to any sort of consolidation that can really happen? Or do you think that if players really need to do so, this is quite possible?
Nisha, if you rewind the clock, say about 24 months to maybe 30 months, there's been, prior to that, there was a fair degree of lack of clarity on regulations. As far as M&A was concerned. But, around the 2-year mark, there was the M&A guidelines which were announced and which allowed for the transactions to technically take place. Earlier this year, we had clarity in terms of spectrum trading and sharing rules which had come out, which has again further facilitated a sort of proxy M&A in the sector. Players have acquired spectrum where possible, fulfill their gaps, and also, enhance their market delivery capability. So in effect, the framework is already in place, very much favorable to and conducive to getting M&A done. The key question is something that you alluded to earlier. Will people see value in undertaking transactions just for the sake of bulking up on the customer base? You need to keep in mind that transactions of this nature are very large and complex, can take 12 to 18 months to consummate. It's 12 to 18 months of distraction as well. So it's going to be a fine interplay between how do I manage my operations versus should I get distracted with integrating a large platform through an M&A event.
Yes, there has been fair bit of activity when it comes to deal flow in the telecom sector as well, like Reliance ADAG Group along with Aircel is also in the works right now, Arcom and ADA and Aircel. Apart from that, some of the others also. But looking at the entire landscape, do you think that the deal flows would continue in the near future? Do you see enough action? You have your ears to the ground.
Clearly, the steps in the market that we have seen over the last this week is testament to the fact that there will be a certain amount of impact on the economic model of the telecom operators. If I were to parse the industry into the incumbents, the top three players versus the rest, I think the lower half needs to definitely focus on enhancing its economic model. It's partially was broken earlier. It's potentially been weakened even further with the launch of Reliance Jio. So therefore, one would expect the smaller players to consider consolidation, consider even in some extreme cases exit from the markets by selling off assets or collection of assets to the incumbents. So yes, I do see a fair degree of activity around the tier 2 operators trying to better their position in the market.
Do you think that with the kind of tariff war that the sector is expecting, the kind of intense competition and the cash guzzler that the sector has been, how do you see the landscape when it comes to the investors coming in? There are some private equity players which are invested in some of the companies. Singtel is invested in Bharti. Axiata Providence had been in Idea. There have been fair bit of investments there. Do you see that the investors would still come with their money for the telecom sector? And will the sector be re-rated downwards? Because the stock markets do indicate that.
Well, Nisha, you mentioned a few names there, and the likes of Singtel and Axiata are large strategic players who have remained invested in India for fairly long periods of time. They will continue to remain invested, and they see the value in playing in such a large market like India in the long run. I don't see their viewpoint or position being drastically changing in the short term. In terms of new investors, yes, the market event and the market disruption which exists will lead to a certain level of deferment in potential investments. Everyone would want to try and see how the marketplace sort of settles into a new norm or a new the average. Once that does happen, I do see investment coming back in. It is a certain level of state of flux today. Once that settles, clearly there will be opportunities for investors to invest in the sector, given the size and scale of it. It's one of the largest telecom businesses globally, and therefore there would be enough opportunity to invest and achieve optimal levels of returns.
It's a very noble thought, Topsy, but one last word and one word if you can answer. Will you be fairly occupied on the deal street when it comes to telecom sector in the next 1.5 years?
I think this sector has a way of keeping most of us quite occupied through time, and we've always been. And I do expect activity, be it the large incumbents looking at ways to consolidate the junior players in the market, or capital raisings to keep most of the firms busy in relation to deal activity. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Topsy, for sparing time and joining us on Big Deal. Thanks so much. Appreciate your views and your time for this. And with that, let's also put a standard disclaimer. Reliance Industries, the promoter of Reliance Jio, also controls Network 18, which owns CNBC TV 18, the channel you're watching. With that, we'll slip into a short breather. But remember, lots of deal flow and lots of deals got announced in this week. We'll take you through all of that when we return.